Welcome back, everybody, to the Historical Movies Podcast. My name is Ross. I'm an editor, and in this episode, we're looking at Fitzcarraldo, a movie that was so difficult to make that they made an entire documentary about it. We're talking on-set arguments, chainsaw self-amputations, plane crashes, and offers to have the lead actor assassinated. And of course, there's a film to talk about as well. And to join me to do that, as ever, is my brother Bryce, Professor of Modern World History at Liverpool Hope University. Bryce, welcome to the jungle.
Hello there. Good to be in the Peruvian Amazon.
Yes, Fitzcarraldo. Where to start with this one? Well, I'll tell you where we start. Is this movie, right, it's obviously held up as like a critic's choice. It's very popular with critics, not so much with audiences. Is this movie overrated, in your opinion, or is it a work of genius by director Werner Herzog?
Well, I must admit, I'd never heard of this movie. I came to it actually by friend of the pod and movie director Mark O'Connor. Mark said to me, "You must watch this. We've got some sort of similar interests with Peru, and potentially we're kind of working on a screenplay about set sort of during this period in Peru." Anyway, so he said, "You must watch it." Mark rates it very highly. I very much enjoyed watching it. However, I think I'm going to be firmly in the camp of massively overrated. Which
it's interesting. Yeah, it's one of those. I think it's a divider. I should have mentioned actually in preparation for this podcast, Werner Herzog, the director, who many people will have heard of, who's a kind of big personality. We'll come on to that, how that's affected this film. But I've prepared, Bryce, as you will be delighted to hear, I'm sure, a small soundboard of some of his quotes. So throughout this podcast, it will be littered with things like,
"Now it is still alive, biding its time. Nobody has yet begun to suspect the impending doom."
Just so we have the narration of Herzog whispering through our ears throughout, because that's one of the things I enjoy about his documentaries. Anyway,
I want to come. It's not going to get tedious. Great.
I want to come right to the end of this movie. The ending is Fitzcarraldo. Obviously, this is a man who wants to build an opera house in the jungle for reasons unbeknownst to anyone but himself. And to do that, he gets involved in the Amazonian rubber industry, a very interesting history, which we'll talk about in a minute. But I want to talk about the ending to this movie, which really surprised me, Bryce, because Klaus Kinski, of course, who plays Fitzcarraldo, is not a nice person. That's been established. Both of his daughters, after he died, accused him of sexually assaulting them when they were kids. We know from Werner Herzog of the absolutely insane arguments that he used to have on sets. Very, very tumultuous, probably bipolar man. And in that, because I knew that, I was not on Fitzcarraldo's side, really, during this movie. I was interested in looking at him. So the ending surprised me because he kind of gets his own way, kind of gets what he wants. It's a very positive ending for Fitzcarraldo. And I thought, when I watched that ending, I thought, what is this movie about? Because I just presumed throughout this movie, we're talking about these great feats that men do for no apparent reason and, bringing a steamship over a mountain, completely insane. They must die at the end. Their own stupid ideas will kill them. No, he gets his opera on his steamboat and he sails up the Amazon all jolly and happy. What is this movie about? What is the ending of this movie about?
Well, on your first point, I've always been of the school that you have to separate the art from the artist, which I know in some cases is very hard to do. So I take your point. I didn't know that rather dark stuff about your man. I did realize he was an extremely difficult character. Well, look, in terms of the history, yes, that did leave me wondering with the ending, what the hell is this about? And he gets his opera, and it kind of left me thinking, who cares? Because, the novelty of this movie, the period it's describing is sort of turn of the 20th century, exploitation in the rubber industry in Latin America. And, I guess for me, that's the real story. I don't really care about the vainglorious character and his frankly silly idea to, bring Wagner to the natives or whatever he's trying to do. However, I think I suppose you have to in some ways admire Fitzcarraldo's character, his just absolute optimism and sort of upbeat determination to get this stupid project to realization. But, a couple of men at least die in the process. Probably more, I can't remember, I think it's 2 we see getting crushed by the boat, don't we, as they try and drive it across one bend of the river to another. And then you just sort of have this very silly sort of high Germanic camp opera scene at the end with his silly wife, and he's succeeded, and you just think, oh well, bully for him, but who gives a toss?
Yeah, well, don't forget his name is Brian Sweeney Fitzgerald in this movie, Klaus Kinski. So he's actually, is this technically the worst Irish accent of all time in a movie?
He says my pappy was Irish, doesn't he, at some stage? So yes, it's all a bit strange. I mean, there's something though that I do really love about this movie. I can see why some people view it as, use that very overused phrase, iconic, because it's sort of, I guess it's that sort of the triumph of the human spirit, I suppose, in some ways, is the indomitability of the man of ideas. I don't know, is that what it's driving at here?
There's something magnetically interesting about people who are obsessed with an idea to do something, and Klaus Kinski is brilliant in this movie, because it's basically, this movie is about him. Everyone else is just is wallpaper in the background. No one is they're not much of characters. And there's something absolutely magnetic about his performance as Fitzcarraldo that for some reason you end up asking yourself, why do I want this guy to succeed? This is one of the most stupid ideas of all time. My favorite film critic, Roger Ebert, says, I'll read you a quote so we might get some ideas about what this film is about. Fitzcarraldo is a film about obsession, and it's also an example of obsession. Herzog has made a movie about a man who wants to haul a steamship over a mountain, and in order to do so, Herzog has hauled a steamship over a mountain. The effort required is so enormous that it becomes the subject of the film itself. Now, I've mentioned in the opening to this, the production hell this movie is famous for. It might be more famous, the process making this movie, than the movie itself. And I think that's one of the questions I want to ask you is basically, did you know about the production hell before you watched it? And if you didn't, would you still, be sort of absorbed by it?
I didn't know about the production. In fact, I knew very little about the movie. I didn't really have time to do any research on it. I was just instructed by Mark O'Connor to watch it, which I did. And I did enjoy it, I suppose, as a watch. But I guess, like a lot of people, I asked myself sort of at the end, so what? Like, what's the kind of moral of the story here? And, the production, would that have coloured my... I try and view stuff dispassionately from everything that's going on. However, you tell me, but I think one of the issues potentially around the production hell, as well as the difficult nature of working with your man Kinski, was the question of... they're depicting really exploitation of native peoples, and there was some question mark, I believe, wasn't there, about whether they'd actually kind of tipped over that boundary in terms of the filming. The movie, filming the movie itself had sort of basically exploited these communities. And I suppose, yes, had I known, because I sort of did a bit of reading about that afterwards, and had I known that watching it, I think I would have been even more disappointed with the ending, I suppose, because again, the question would be, for what?
Well, yeah, I mean, Werner Herzog completely refutes that. He says, we did not exploit people making this movie. Now, I have a list of things that happened on this movie which may suggest otherwise.
Go on,
but
he do share.
Well, it will take a while. Okay, we'll go into the section now. I was going to maybe bring it on a bit later, but this is the production hell, ladies and gentlemen, that this movie went through. This is quite a story. So, this is 1982. This movie is legendary for being one of the most troubled and dangerous in the film history, often compared to the chaotic production of Apocalypse Now. I think we've talked on this podcast previously about the man not even reading the very short book, Heart of Darkness, to prepare for Apocalypse Now. The original lead actor, Bryce, in this was Jason Robards, and he left the production after contracting severe amoebic dysentery. He was forbade by his doctor to go back to the jungle. He exited with his co-star. The original co-star of this was Mick Jagger, as in, yes, that Mick Jagger from the Rolling Stones. He had to leave because the Rolling Stones were going on tour. So basically, Werner Herzog, who had shot 40% of this movie, had to start again with Klaus Kinski because of that problem.
So what character would Jagger have been playing?
Jagger is playing Fitzcarraldo's assistant, and that was written out for this version.
Well,
so
in the version we see, there's no assistant.
Exactly, it's written out of the film.
I mean, can you imagine Jagger actually, as his assistant, I don't know if we can drag this ship all the way over to the other part of the river.
Sounds a bit like Rising Damp. So initial production in Peru had to be evacuated due to a border dispute between Peru and Ecuador. The production camp was burnt down. Werner Herzog moved production to a new location in Peru. I believe Werner Herzog said he had to help holding a light while some surgery was done, like on the table, because there were some injuries during the fact that this camp was burnt down. Right, so in the new camp in Peru, Bryce, we're in Peru now, okay, the second camp. 2 extras die of disease. A logger was bitten by a poisonous snake and used his chainsaw to immediately amputate his own foot and survived, to stop the venom, and survived. 2 separate plane crashes occurred, one leaving a crew member permanently paralyzed. Brazilian engineer walked out because he said the whole thing was completely unsafe. We'll get into Klaus Kinski maybe later. He had unbelievably volatile and violent outbursts, pissed off the locals, pissed off the whole crew. His behavior was so bad that apparently a local indigenous chief offered to kill Kinski for Herzog.
Now, that's according to. I've heard that's an old wives' tale.
That's interesting because that's how Herzog tells the story. But the production manager, a guy called Walter Saxer, says that that's not true. But it's very difficult to find an actual reference to Walter Saxer. It all seems to be secondhand information. So basically, we don't know. This will come on to my point later of, Werner Herzog's a very good salesman, is selling his personality. Is it basically, are we giving him too much credit, basically? He's a very interesting, he's a very charismatic person. So I better finish this. So then it was played by Drought. They run out of money several times. Apparently, Herzog was flying from South America back to Europe to find funding. There was terrible food. 20 people were injured. And the only pastime they had was playing football until the one football that they had burst. And maybe in the long list of production hell, maybe that's the worst thing that happened during this. So my question is, now that you know all of that, did you know before you saw that? Did you know that stuff before you saw it? Because before I saw this, I'd heard about the documentary that was made in the same year, telling us all of these things. And so when I watched the movie itself, I basically realized that the movie is a movie that's not just about the live action, it's about the production process of making a movie.
Right, yeah, okay. And I suppose in that way, it's very sort of postmodern in a sort of Herzogian way. Sure, I didn't know all of those details. I guess what it kind of boils down to, as you've alluded to there, is do you view Werner Herzog as some kind of genius? Having been forced to sit through by yourself innumerable tediously boring Werner Herzog archaeology documentaries. Yeah, he's holding them up there.
Just holding them up for the people listening. I'm holding up 2 DVDs.
Geography documentaries narrated by him. I've never subscribed to the Herzog myth. Maybe I just haven't absorbed enough of his output. Obviously, he's in what's that movie? He's in one of the Mission Impossibles as a baddie. He's a good baddie.
He's even in The Simpsons. He knows that he's a character. He does a lot of good self-promotion, I would say.
When you're out in the countryside and you see chicken, try to look a chicken in the eye with great intensity. Just
another one for you, Bryce. That kind of stuff, isn't it?
See, I don't subscribe to it. I don't get it. I've never got it, to be honest. So I guess in some ways, especially after what you said there, a lot of this comes down to, do you rate Herzog? For me, I'm afraid it's a not really. Then again, I have to say, I haven't checked out all his stuff.
Yeah, no, I will hold my hands up. I like his documentaries. I think he's a wonderful documentary maker. And when I was studying film almost 20 years ago now, it was off the back of Grizzly Man, the film he made about Timothy Treadwell being mauled to death by a bear and so on, and Encounters at the End of the World, and all of these documentaries were very cool, and his style was very cool, and his accent was very in vogue. And I can do an impression of him, and you have key phrases that send you into how a person would talk. For me, Werner Herzog is, how would he say the old mountain? He would say, the old mountain tells its own tale of the crippling infidelity of life, or something like that. That's my Herzog.
Very good.
Thank you very much. So, I mean, that's basically the thing that the whole point of this movie. I've got another quote here from Derek Malcolm from The Guardian. He says, it's impossible to separate the film from the circumstances of its making. And perhaps that is Herzog's point, in that cinema, like obsession, must consume everything in its path. And it is not possible to separate this movie, I think. More than any other movie I can think of that's been made. It seems to me that the whole point of the movie is the way that the movie was made, and that has to be, you kind of have to know that. And people that know this movie tend to be, let's be honest, film buffs, and they tend to know, I suppose, like me, they tend to know that every intricate detail of how it was made and so on. And that's part and parcel of this movie. But you didn't know that stuff coming into it, so I want to hear more about how that affected.
I can see now why it was recommended to me by Mark O'Connor as a fellow director. I'm sure it's really inspirational to him. And I was actually, when I watched it, even some of those shots, when obviously they weren't using drones back then, and you think, wow, like how did? There's actually one scene where it's clearly a model boat.
Yeah,
isn't it? But well, not clearly actually. And actually, you think?
I think it is clearly. I think you're right. I think it is really clear that it's a model boat.
The whole thing it's an incredible achievement in terms of. Like cinematically, I suppose. But I can't help but feel there's a bit of, how can I put it? There's a bit of folly to it. And it's a bit of sort of problematic folly, because without wanting to sound like, too woke or whatever, you're kind of replicating the sort of white savior type colonial tropes, aren't you? Again, maybe you want to sound your woke alarm here. For the sake of the art, the genius, the sort of genius, Northern European white man comes and does this, and it's a reflection on the art of cinema itself. And I have to say, like with some of Herzog's stuff, but call me a Philistine here, it's all a bit wanky.
Yeah, simply put, yeah. I think this is a very key point I want to get your historical opinion on, because we should mention the history behind this movie. There is some historical truth to it, not just in the feat of bringing a steamboat over a mountain on the Amazon River, but also in the background of the Peruvian rubber boom, basically. There was a real guy called Carlos Fermin Fitzcarraldo, who was a Peruvian robber baron during the late 19th century. And then there's this Amazon rubber boom, Bryce, isn't there, from in the late 19th century. Rubber was in huge demand globally for industrial uses and machinery. And rubber trees, of course, are indigenous to the Amazon. The original Fitzcarraldo in 1894 transported a steamship from one river basin to the other. Basically, he did this, but his steamship was disassembled and put into parts, and it weighed 30 tons. And in this movie, we've got a more than 300-ton boat that's moved in one part. So, and Fitzcarraldo was not particularly nice to the indigenous people. He coerced indigenous labor, about 1,000 people. It took over 2 months to move the ship, but that's basically what it's based on. It's based on this boom for rubber that lasted from about 1817 to 1910 in the Amazon jungle. And I think you've got one or two things to say about the history of that period.
Well, yeah. First of all, the moving the boats. It really great historical parallel there with the fall of Constantinople with the Muslim forces. That's what they actually do, on the Bosphorus there. But in terms of that immediate, historical context in the early 20th century. Well, this is probably explains my problem with the movie. So myself and Mark O'Connor have been discussing for a long time to do some kind of biopic / movie of some sort on Roger Casement. Roger Casement is a great hero of mine and quite a lot of people. You know, one of the founders of modern humanitarianism. He was of big house Northern Irish Protestant stock. Then goes on to become a servant of empire. Is knighted for his work in exposing the horrible excesses of the exploitation of resources of rubber in the Congo. Again, here's where you mentioned Heart of Darkness. Here's where Joseph Conrad comes in. They're contemporaries. They are friends, correspondents, Casement and Conrad. And Conrad is describing that descent into inhumanity. That's what Heart of Darkness, the book, is all about. On the back of this, Casement is commissioned by the British government to go and look at excesses in the Peruvian Amazon in the early 20th century. A lot of European capital and American capital invested there. But similarly to the horrific exploitation by the Belgians in the Congo, you've got the horrible exploitation of the indigenous people there for their labor. And Casement is an incredible character because he goes from being a knighted establishment figure to then being so reviled by the capitalist excesses, I suppose, of imperialism that he is motivated in a very anti-imperialistic way to join the Irish rebels in 1916. And Casement is then, comes in, lands in Bannostrand down in Kerry, is caught. He's with the rebels. He's trying to import arms, German arms, is then executed by the British. And a final twist on that one, largely on the evidence of his homosexuality.
Okay. I didn't know that.
Yes, because he kept diaries when he was in Peru in this sort of period when he was up in the Amazon and detailing sort of homosexual encounters. And that, the tragedy is that's what kind of sealed his fate in some way when those diaries were discovered. The veracity of which has been disputed, by the way. But, I think it's pretty evident that he was a gay man. He was also, a leading anti-imperialist humanitarian of this period. So the point for me, that's how I came to this movie, because in trying to do something on the great man, Casement, Mark said, well, you got to watch this movie of this period. And I guess that's the central problem here for me. Well, I view any work not with, it has to conform to any historical meta-narrative or it has to be moralistic and it has to be telling the right story. However, quite clearly in this period of early 20th century rubber exploitation in the Peruvian Amazon and, in the north of Peru, you're up near Ecuador, it's the indigenous people who are being exploited, and it's the Fitzcarraldos, the rubber barons of this world, who are the baddies. Yeah. And that's the point that Casement is making. In a time of high imperialism and utter racism, he's sticking up for the oppressed. And yet you get none of that in this movie. Not that it has to. It doesn't have to tell that moral. However, let's be quite clear here. Historically speaking, and this is a historical movies podcast. All right, this is a work of art, and it's a work of art about making a work of art. But let's be really categoric. The Fitzcarraldos were the assholes here. These were barbarous, greedy, inhumane, unscrupulous individuals, full of that horrid imperialistic frontiersman exploitative mentality, greed and barbarism, basically. And I just don't think you get enough of that here. It's almost as if for Herzog and for the fictional character Fitzcarraldo, the indigenous people are once again, they are expendable.
Yeah, a commodity to be consumed.
Yeah, and I think that's probably a bit of an irony, given that for me, the big story and what story I hope to one day do with Mark of this period is when people like Casement, for the first time, sort of founding the notion of human rights, in some ways in the modern era, say, hang on a minute, what you are doing is disgusting. These people are human beings. Now, do you really get any sense of that here? No, you get kind of the noble savage in flashes, but you don't really get any sense that, Fitzcarraldo's a baddie. Like you said, in a way, you're actually rooting for him because of his mad designs.
Yeah, I suppose you could argue that's the point of the movie, but that's exactly the same problem I had with this movie. I should mention that the Mark O'Connor, we've done an episode with him. We did an interview with him. He's a director of things like Cardboard Gangsters and Amongst the Wolves is his latest film. So you can check out that episode, listeners. Very interesting episode. We do see one thing that really interested me in this movie is we see the rubber production, don't we? In the Amazon, we actually see the indigenous workers making rubber or tapping the rubber out of these trees. When I was struck when I was watching this movie about how basically it's not pro-colonialist, but there is a very little. It seems pretty clear that if you're a white European and you go to a country to do something absolutely stupid, like dragging a steamship over a mountain, and as I've mentioned, 2 people die, people get injured, there's plane crashes and all that stuff. And now, I'm not saying that's directly responsible. Herzog's directly responsible, but it's got massive colonial overtones, hasn't it? I can't pick that apart in my head from this. And the movie is about, the it's not. It doesn't have to be critical, but the movie is about the excesses of colonialism. I read somewhere that basically Herzog in a lot of his movies, he portrays the jungle as defeating the idea that Western colonialism can tame nature. It destroys all the best laid plans. Now, I didn't actually get such a feeling of that in this movie. I had a feeling in this movie. I don't think it is as clever as a lot of people are saying that it is. That's my take.
No, I agree.
It seems like he's made an obsessive film and then has sort of almost retrospectively, not gone, but look at all these layers. It was difficult to make, and I'm making a point about colonialism, and the jungle is untamable. And I don't quite have the feeling. I can't explain it in words, but I just don't have the feeling in this movie that it has that kind of, I don't know, clarity, sharp clarity, focus that colonial activity is actually a really bad thing to do. That's my feeling.
Making a film about Peru, a historical movie about Peru, I think, I'm sorry, that there is a certain historical weight there because of, to go back to that history of white colonization. Of course, you go back to the discovery of the Americas, the fall of the Incan Empire. No, the Incan Empire in itself was a sort of imperialist entity and very oppressive, sure. But, you can't, I suppose, approach any of this without having that background of the colonization of that part of the world, the Columbian exchange, as it's called, the horrific acts dealt against the native population by the likes of Pizarro and the conquistadors. And of course, even at that time, there were early humanitarians like Bartolomé de las Casas, church figures, beseeching, the Spanish crown which they, to be fair, eventually did, accord the natives, status as human souls, etc. But there's a whole story of exploitation which just rumbles on then into the independence period of Peru, where a lot of those republics which are founded post-Spanish colonization are really racist republics, and on into the current day where you still have huge endemic problems because of the legacies of colonialism and racism and all the rest, and massive inequalities, especially when it comes to the jungle, La Selva, and the indigenous population there. So, I suppose in some ways what I'm trying to say is you've got a kind of weight of history bearing down on you there. I'm sure Herzog, being an intelligent man, was aware of that. And yeah, nobody wants a movie that's too moralistic and finger wagging and all the rest. But to come back to the ending, great, we all have a hoolie with the classical musicians on the boat. Well, for what? What's been the...
I don't know what the ending is. The thing that I come back to, because I didn't, I was sure they were going to die, and I kind of didn't want them to die because I thought that would just sort of be a cop out. We've seen that before, but the ending that we get in this movie, I found extremely disappointing. It just made me question the whole venture as a whole, and I just don't think it's good enough to say, we're doing it because it's a crazy thing to do. There's a famous quote by Edmund Hillary. Someone asked him, "Why are you climbing Mount Everest?" And he said, "Because it's there." And I always think, well, wouldn't the interviewer say, yeah, but why are you climbing Mount Everest? You haven't answered the question. Okay, I know it's like, oh, because we're challenging ourselves and we're pushing the blah, 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 pushing the limits and all that kind of stuff. But it's not enough for me. I just want to mention as well, in the destruction of the Incan Empire, the Spanish destroyed all of their knotted string records, didn't they, as well? I think there's only about 4 or 5 of them left of these, probably used for like counting grain surpluses and things like that. But we don't actually know what they were used for. And it always struck me as particularly cruel, not only to come over, kill a load of them through disease, germs and gunpowder, as they say, but also to basically try to liquidate their culture seems just so excessively barbaric that when we're coming back to talking about colonialism and a movie made in Peru and thinking about things historically, it just surprises me, this movie, a little bit. I'm not going to get all woke about it, don't worry, but it just surprises me. Bryce, I need to mention something. Well, they're on the subject of history. Apparently, we were talking about what is the point of this movie. Well, I can tell you what inspired Herzog to make this movie. And that is something archaeological called the Karnak stones, which is basically 3,000 individual huge monoliths, huge standing stones in northwest France. The oldest of which is from about 6,500 years ago. That's before Stonehenge, and that's important because that means that these stones were erected by hunter-gatherers, not farmers. And the presumption is always to create such massive monuments, you have to have the surplus of farm production and a sedentary lifestyle, blah, blah, blah. But these weren't. And apparently he was traveling through France and came across these stones and saw a pamphlet saying that it is not possible that these stones are made by humans. Wow. It, in fact, was ancient aliens that came and they erected the stones and blah, blah, blah. We know all the stuff. And that inspired him to make this movie, to say, no, it is possible. Now, why that inspired him to make a movie about dragging a steamship over a hill rather than erecting prehistoric stones, I don't know. But I thought it was an interesting thing that he said that inspired him. Of course, we don't know why those stones were erected. We've got no idea. And we will never have any idea why they were erected. So maybe that is the point that Herzog gets to in very often in his movies, that there's a quantity in humanity that you can't analyze, that you can't know, that you can't light. You know, that there's something that comes back. That I think that's what kind of his playing with that aspect of humanity and what it means to be human is why I think a lot of his movies, a lot of his documentaries are sort of, yeah, I've used the word before, sort of magnetic to watch. Anyway.
After 35 years of knowing John Waters, I have the feeling this man is gay.
Fed up with those yet, Bryce?
No, they'll never get old.
Okay. So have we've discussed enough. We've talked about the production. Should we get on to our list of questions? Oh, one final question I want to ask you is best jungle movie ever made?
Yes. Best jungle movie. Hang on. What's that one with Arnold Schwarzenegger where they're in the jungle, and is it Predator?
Is the correct answer.
Yeah, there you go.
It doesn't hold a light to Predator. So I've got a fact for you. I've just all over the place with my wonderful soundboard, but
how about that?
The map used by Fitzcarraldo, Bryce, in the film does not reflect actual Peruvian geography. And another one.
Splice the main brace, Mr. Mate.
The award we like to give for basically pissheads in a movie. I was going to give it to the cook, who is an absolutely diehard alcoholic in this movie, but I'm going to give it to the horse that you see at the beginning. If you remember, there's a horse drinking champagne at the very beginning of this movie when they're rushing to get to the opera.
Yes.
And also, let's really empty the bench when I give this the
tea and toast and jam.
Bobby Robson Award for underwhelming food. Apparently, Jason Robards, the original lead in this movie, this is right. He did not react well to the jungle. Apparently, he got steaks flown in from Miami while he was making this movie. So I thought that was worth mentioning. I found that amazing.
Well, it is a very forbidding environment. I suppose that is remarkable. In some ways, the achievement of this movie, because I know people who, even in sort of like last year, I was talking to someone who'd been out there, and it's it's not the most easy place to, in terms of just the sheer, hostility of the terrain, and the difficulties of getting in food, and the ever-present threat of disease and all the rest. Not to mention the poverty and exploitation of the locals. So, yes, I can imagine getting a steak flown in. Yeah, because otherwise, you might. Again, eating, you're kind of taking your life in your hands sometimes. In terms of.
Well, he apparently also refused to drink the local beer called Masato, which is made from yucca root, but it's fermented in saliva.
Yeah.
Yeah. So.
Yummy.
Yeah. Bryce, your favorite character or performance? Can we look past Klaus Kinski for this award, for this recommendation?
I don't think you can, because, being the titular character, he, whatever about his private life, details of which I didn't really know. I knew he was a very difficult character, but, in purely viewing this as a piece of cinema, it's so that centrifugal force of him. I mean, you just can't get beyond it, can you?
No, it's magnetic. I don't know if you've seen a clip. First of all, I don't know if you've seen a clip of Jagger and Robard playing the lead roles. There's only a couple of minutes that survive, but you look at it and you think, yeah, good choice not to have them.
We should do an episode, just to quickly butt in there, on historical movies which never made it to film and release.
Great idea.
Somebody sent me a clip this week of Al Pacino in a film never released. I forget the name of it, but he's trying to do a London accent. It's hilarious. I'll send it on to you. It's the funniest thing you've ever heard. And I think we should do maybe an episode on stuff that never made it to the big screen.
And she's got a great bottom.
Who's that now?
Oh, just that was my impression of Al Pacino from Heat when he goes, and she's got a great ass, like that. But I try to make it. I made it more English. Yeah.
If listeners are interested, if we do have, I'm sure we have some nerdy sort of film trivia listeners. I'm just gonna get the movie. It's not a historical movie. Al Pacino's hilarious attempt at an English accent. You've got to see this. And the movie never released was called The Local Stigmatic.
It's about someone having a stigmata or something.
Quite possibly. I don't know. He's talking about a dog doing a shit in the clip. But he's trying to do a Cockney accent. Can you imagine? Anyway.
Have you seen the clip? Talking of clips, there's a famous clip of Klaus Kinski going absolutely ballistic on set. They've got one. They filmed him when they the documentary they made that came out in the same year as this movie, and he's going absolutely crazy. And Werner Herzog tells a story about how there was a plane crash. One of the stories was that one of the plane crashes, he was going ballistic for 90 minutes about the everyone's and the camp, right, we've got to find these, we don't know how many people have survived, we've got to send out a search party, and he's complaining for 90 minutes to Werner Herzog about the fact that his coffee is cold. And Herzog says there was foam around his mouth and it had hardened. Do you know how long it takes for foam to harden? And there's another one where he's going ballistic and Herzog apparently goes, he goes, I was this close in his face and I had a piece of Toblerone chocolate and that was like gold in the jungle and I ate it right in his face. That's what he says.
Wow. So, we should have the new award for biggest diva on set.
Yeah, absolutely crazy. In the insanity of this movie. I've only covered the surface of the production element of this movie, by the way. What's your favourite scene, Bryce? Oh, actually, before we move on, did you realise that one of the tribal kids is called McNamara?
Yes, I saw that, yeah.
Maybe we're related on a mother's side. I don't know.
McNamara's, of course. So, yeah, that's an interesting one. Favorite scene. I don't know. I mean, we'll get on to the fact I think that the movie's too long, but I guess you can't help but, when they actually make it over the hill, I guess that's there's a sense of relief there that maybe the film's going to end soon, I suppose.
My favorite scenes are I want my opera house.
Oh, yes.
And the bit where I think that the shot of the film is when he's playing the gramophone, and is it Wagner? He's playing to the jungle. It's not even, he's the jungle's passing him by in the background. He's trying to organize the jungle with opera, trying to bring unity to the chaos of the jungle. And there's also a really amazing. We talked about not using drone shots and stuff. There's a beautiful long shot of when the natives, quote unquote, are felling trees into the Amazon.
Yeah.
And there's this incredibly beautiful, like long lens shot of them on their canoes, and it's like at dusk, and the trees are coming in left and right into the Amazon. I just thought it was an incredible shot to organize all of that and to film it in that way. It was amazing. So you think this is? I think this movie is too long. I think the last half of this movie could do with a machete to tighten up, take out about 10 minutes, because it just drags. I think it loses a lot of halfway through. It kind of loses the pacing. I feel
it's a one of them. In the mood of Heart of Darkness, it's one of those going up the river movies. So, like Apocalypse Now, like The African Queen with Humphrey Bogart. Going up the river pieces, and eventually with all of those movies, I get fed up of going up the river. I get fed up. In fact, when I'm on any boat that for too long a time, I just want to jump overboard. I get bored.
Insanity.
I'm afraid I got bored with this. I thought it was how long is it actually? It's about 3 hours, is it?
2.5, 3. Yeah, I think it's about 2:37 or something. Yeah. Yeah, I think it's too long. What would Cloughy have made of this, Bryce? Brian Clough? I
think he would have viewed it as a lot of silly nonsense, Ross.
Yeah. I think he would have had seriously had something to say about the exploitation of indigenous labour, for maybe. Who should do the DVD commentary? I mean, how can you not have the dulcet tones of
"Here Comes Honey Boo Boo"?
Well, it's got to be, isn't it? I mean, the man loves himself, loves the sound of his own voice, so it's got to be him. But one thing I wanted to ask you is the version I watched was it looked as if it was dubbed. Was the movie originally in German, dubbed into English?
No, they made it in English, which is interesting because one of his other films is Aguirre, The Wrath of God, which is about a conquistador who's in the, again, Peruvian jungle, and he goes off to find El Dorado and goes insane, basically. Right. But that's in German. But this was made in English. But I presume some of the because I think Klaus Kinski's definitely not dubbed, but maybe like the boat captain or something.
Yeah, definitely.
It seems a bit
what's going on,
doesn't it? It's like watching those old spaghetti westerns. I love it when they redub movies after the fact. Best companion film. I've just mentioned Aguirre, The Wrath of God, which I from 1972. That is. I was thinking, Bryce, or Bridge on the River Kwai, Jungle, getting obsessed about a stupid project, which goes tits up.
Okay. What about, for me, Legally Blonde? Blonde protagonist, narcissist, obsessive sense of self-belief.
Very good. You've taken other aspects and thought laterally. Or just Predator, because Jungle.
Just Predator, yeah.
The Hall of Fame, what items would be put into our museum, props or real historical items?
Oh, well, it has to be the gramophone, doesn't it?
Yes, I thought that. Or I quite like, there's a really crappy painting of Fitzcarraldo and Molly. I thought that would look quite nice on the wall at the beginning. It's like a wedding gift or something, married? I don't know. What would happen in the sequel if there was one? I've written, take the steamboat back over the mountain. Fitzcarraldo 2.
Yeah. Or maybe he. Well, hang on. What he's supposed to be doing is establishing a further, like, rubber mining depot, isn't he?
Yeah,
Up
it's
there.
actually quite confusing. I think. Yeah, go on.
So maybe he would succeed in rationalizing production.
Yes, but we should mention, actually, circling back onto the history, in 1910, or about that kind of time, the Amazon rubber boom collapsed because there was a guy called Henry Wickham who pinched 70,000 rubber tree seeds from the Amazon illegally. Although he was, it was not legal to do that, but he was, and brought them back to Kew, apparently. Only a small percentage germinated, but enough seedlings were then shipped to British colonies such as Sri Lanka, Malaysia, and Singapore, where the rubber boomed later. So the bottom fell out in the Amazon because it was basically brought to other British colonies. It's a bit like Kenya and coffee. They basically just decided, we're going to make Kenya produce loads of tea and coffee, and they killed like 5 million people doing it. It wasn't native there, but we like tea and coffee, so that's what we're going to do. So that's why that ended, apparently. Have you got anything for Suits Corner?
I haven't, but I'm sure that the
don't worry, I've got it. Don't worry.
There must be some absolute gold nuggets for Suits Corner. Do you have any?
Well, one is...
The birds are in misery. I don't think they sing, they just screech in pain.
Which, the longer quote is, the birds do not sing, they shriek in pain, and confused trees tangle with one another like battling titans. I, like a stanza in a poem written in an unknown foreign tongue, am shaken to the core, he says. I don't really know what that means. I've also noticed, interestingly, if you look at from that clip is from the documentary in the 80s, his accent, Werner Herzog, has got way more pronounced. If you look at him in the 80s, when he's speaking English, he still has he's from Munich, but he still has a very strong accent, but it's like he's turned it up to 11, I think. I think he's made a conscious effort to do that.
Hard work sitting next to him at a dinner party. I'm going to say that.
Yeah. Anyway, so Bryce, what are you giving Fitzcarraldo out of 10? Is it going to be low, or is it going to be middling? Sum up the movie for us and why you're giving it the mark that you're giving it.
I've never liked Herzog. I don't like his pretentiousness. I don't like his pseudo-intellectuality. Having said that, and with all of the caveats I've mentioned before, I did, there are moments in this movie where you're glued. And I think cinematically there, like you said there's some just breathtaking scenes. And even if you view it just on that basis, without, viewing it as like a cult classic, without all the stories of production and all the rest, there's definitely, it's a work of art, I suppose. And I don't know, overall, yeah, I think, like I said there, I just found it, I just found myself saying at the end, so what? And so for that reason, I'd probably go mid. Yeah, I'm middling, and I can recognize aspects of genius to it. Don't get me wrong, but I'm probably only going to squeeze out a 5. I'm afraid.
A 5?
Yeah.
Wow.
I just feel that there's a historical movie to be made about this period. It's just, this is not it, and for reasons like I've explained, it completely misses the point. Not that it has to be instructional, but like it completely misses the story that needs to be told about this part of the world at this time in history. And it does it wrapped up within, like I've said, a sort of pretentious and pseudo-intellectual kind of way. And it just, Herzog in general, I'm going to be sort of coming across as an ignoramus here. I'm sure there are people listening who've, studied and loved Herzog and really feel a need for him, that we need him, especially in the world as it is right now. But I just fail to get it a lot of the time. And I feel like sometimes it is wanky and pretentious, and it's like The Emperor's New Clothes. And I'm afraid I'm going to give it a 5 for that reason.
I decided to move to Orlando to be closer to Disney World.
Well, I'm going to paraphrase him and say, against my better judgment, what he says when he's referencing the jungle, that he is disgusted by the fornication and the murder and so on. But against my better judgment, I love it. And I wouldn't say I love this movie, but against my better judgment, there's something in this. I think he basically succeeds, Herzog, in providing something that you can't quite put your finger on, but is kind of absolutely, it draws you in, is fascinating. I think for me, that's the point of this movie.
Yeah.
And I'm going to give it a good 8, a good solid 8 out of 10, because there's something that I think maybe I don't quite get this movie. I think that's the way to say it. I'm not quite there with it. Maybe it's my own ineptitude or whatever.
Herzog. I think that's my problem. I just don't get it in general. Yeah. Well, absolutely, there's something where you can't take your eyes off this. I very much enjoyed it overall. Sorry to interrupt there.
Yeah, well, and I think we're also being ultra critical because this movie is, absolute film buffs. Like it appears in so many like top 10s, and you've got to watch this movie. So we're being ultra critical. But there's something nice about watching a movie there's something about it. Maybe it's the production. It's probably the direction. He did win to Cannes for Best Director. There's something about it that there's an unknowable element to it, which makes it a fascinating watch. And it's always nice to have that, because in the world of fucking endless statistics like XG, and like every time you watch football, it's like statistics are just thrown at you. As Cloughy would say, sometimes, young man, we just want to sit down and watch a game of football. And you don't want to think so much about it. You don't want to understand everything. You don't have to illuminate every dark corner. You just want to enjoy the feeling that you get from it. And this movie gave me a feel, that sense, that feeling of the jungle and all of that stuff, sailing into the heart of darkness. I did get that from this movie.
Okay, you've convinced me. I'll give, yes. All right, you've convinced me. I'll give it a 6.
You convinced me to give it 5.2 or something. Yeah, so a very an enjoyable watch, a bit too long, but I don't quite understand it fully, but a very interesting movie. Bryce, thank you very much for joining me. And if you are watching on YouTube, do please give us a like, a subscribe, leave a comment. Everything helps us, because we don't mix our words. We're not algorithmically friendly, all that kind of stuff. So the only way we get out there is by people like you watching this video now, sharing with your friends or family or anyone you like. So thank you very much for doing that. And leave us a review if you're listening to it on the audio, on the podcast platform. That helps us massively as well. Thank you very much for watching and listening to this episode of the Historical Movies Podcast.